Rowan Ricardo Phillips is most recently the author of Living Weapon. His next book, his current book, Silver, is published in this March. Came out this week. Congratulations. He's a distinguished professor. Oh, yeah. He is a distinguished professor of English at Stony Brook University, president of the board of directors of the New York Institute of the Humanities, and poetry editor at the New Republic. Later, he'll be joined in conversation by Henri Cole, who was born in Fukuoka, Japan, to a French mother and American father. He has published 10 previous collections of poetry and received many awards, including the Jackson Poetry Prize, the Kingsley Tufts Poetry Award, the Rome Prize, the Berlin Prize, the Lenore Marshall Poetry Prize, and the Award of Merit Medal in Poetry from the American Academy of Arts and Letters. He has also published Orphic Paris, a memoir. He lives in Boston, Massachusetts, and teaches at Claremont McKenna College. Please join me in welcoming them. Thank you.
Thank you, first and foremost, to Emma and the entire staff at McNally Jackson, my favorite bookstore. I think in the country, maybe in the world. And thank you all for being here. One, it's been a silver, blustery, chilly day, and two, it's poetry. So I feel really grateful that all of you are here to spend some time with, in art that's really old and arcane, and for me, very sacred. And I don't think anything else for me really is sacred, so that's a pretty big thing. I don't talk much about my work. This is another book that has no notes. So it's kind of like you're swimming through it, and I figure that there's a good chance to chat a little bit. I'm very private, not very forthcoming, but I think that this meeting with a real supreme maker of the craft, Henri Cole, gives me the opportunity to tell you something that I don't usually get to talk about. And it's coming back to New York. I was born and raised here. I see some people I've known since I was very, 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 very small. And I left for college, and I went to grad school for my doctorate, and I had a very, very deep, intensive immersion in the study of poetry. I went to Harvard for a year to teach, and then I was fortunate enough to get a job that would bring me back to New York. So that's the end of 2002. I'm 27, turning 28. And one of the last things I did when I was in graduate school was I sent a manuscript out for an award, the Walt Whitman Award. Is that still around? The Academy of American Poets. It's like a first book. If you haven't published a book, you send that, and maybe you'll get published. And Yusef Koumenyaka was judging it, and I had some poems, and I sent it out. One of the last things I did before I left New England, I come down to New York, and in 2003, I'm just kind of starting to teach. I'm just back in New York, and I'm minding my own business, really trying to think about how to be a grown-up and write poems. This comes out. This book is called Middle Earth. It's by someone named Henri Cole. I'd already known, his previous work, Visible Man, The Wheel of Knowledge, Marble Queen. It's work that really speaks for itself. But kind of I had boots on the ground at this point. School was over, though school never really ends. And I'm buying books with like real grown-up money. So I buy this book of poems, and I crack it open. And here's what I find. Keep in mind at this point, I'm really feeling myself. I'm thinking I'm I'm all right. I know what I'm doing. Self-portrait in a gold kimono. Born, I was born. Tears represent how much my mother loves me. Shivering and steaming like a horse in rain. My heart as innocent as Buddha's. My name a Parisian band leader's. I am trying to stand. Father is holding me and blowing in my ear like a glass blower on a flame. Stars on his blue serge uniform flaunt a feeling of formal precision and stoicism. Growing, I am growing now, as straight as red pines in the low mountains. Please don't leave, Grandmother Pearl. I have become distressed watching the president's caisson. We together move to the big house. Shining, the sun is shining on my timeline. Tears, copper-hot tears, splatter the house when Father is drunk, irate, and boisterous. Bishop, I just caught that. The essence of self emerges, shuttling between parents. Noel, the wet nimbus of Noel's tongue, draws me out of the pit. I drop acid with Rita. Shea Wu Eros is released. I eat sugar like a canary from a grown man's tongue. The draft card torn up. The war lost. I cling like a cicada to the latticework of memory. Mother, I have memories too. Don't let me forget them. Father, I'm glad the journey's set. I'm glad I'm going. Crows, the voices of crows leaving their nests at dawn circle around as I sit in a gold kimono, feeling the subterranean magma flows. The sultry air, the hand holding a pen, bending to write. Thank you, Mother and Father, for creating me. So, at that point, I started to pray to God that that manuscript I sent would not be accepted for this award, because I needed to start over. I was a finalist. I didn't get it. I was actually very, very happy because it was an encounter that had me think about a lot of things about how to write and why to write. Henri's been chugging on since then, most recently Grafton Center. But thank you, Henri, not just for the poem, but for showing me what the levels are. There are always levels. So here we are. So I didn't mean to give you homework, but I did want you to just kind of look at the handout that you have for a second. It's a Wordsworth poem that I hope that some of you kind of have. We'll just call it Tintern Abbey and leave the rest. Leave the rest out. Poems are machines. They're things made of words. I think of poetry the way I think of painting or sculpting or producing music. It's a thing. You're in a studio. It's a plastic art. I'm going to start by reading a poem in the back of the book called Child of Nature. That's very much in conversation with this poem that you have in your hands. That's just, some of you have the whole poem. A lot of you just have the first few lines. I forgot, it takes up a lot of real estate. It doesn't seem like a long poem to me. But I mention this because if you happen to have silver and you go to Child of Nature, you'll notice that the last word of every line is exactly the same as Wordsworth's poem. So it's a different idea of engagement, and not something that I really wanted to kind of trumpet or anything. It's part of the reason I don't have notes in my book. It's very kind of, look at what I'm doing. I'm not really interested in that. But one of the things that I like about certain projects like this, or constraints that I give myself, is that I can show you that, poetry does have the answer to Schrodinger's cat. When you close the book, the poem is alive. So this is a poem that's always wrestling with Wordsworth, not just in content, but just in how it is. So that's why you'll also hear some words like oft and perchance. They were Wordsworth's, but we are victims of contemporaneity when we're bad artists. So I just went at it. So here we go. You're going to have to bear with me. This thing happens with new books where you're not really sure everything is. And a lot of this, I don't know that poems are about anything, but I grew up in the Bronx, and there's a lot of rhetoric of like, oh, let me take you out of where you're from, out into nature, so you can experience things. And I would always be like, no. I grew up in a 3-bedroom house with a backyard and a den, but that's not the point. The point is just that kind of like, you need to love where you're from, and everywhere is nature. I don't believe in hierarchies, and there's real kind of hierarchical messaging sometimes in telling people they need to go someplace else so that they can live. I'm a child of nature. This poem is called Child of Nature. Maybe 7 years, or if not, some length of time like that has come and gone. I hear them in my head. In the clear mountain springs I left behind when I returned again to my hometown, New York. Its steel cliffs sag-glassed and star-stunned in the weak impress of sunlight and solitude. Years connect and disconnect me. The winter-sharp sky and the cold comfort of a cloud in repose in it that once seen vanishes from view as nature imagines the orchard tufts that cloud has passed over, the haloed fruits the sun and moon steal at dawn for themselves before day starts, and the talking heads see emerging from their foxholes practiced lines on the sanctity of God and Christ, farms, the infestor, the glory of coal smoke, and the movement we need, swinging from trees. Having let be my center of seam, I spent 1.5 years in the woods, culling from those cold mountaintops the next fire, feeling infinite and alone. What forms first, a thing or its form, the I or me, the maker or the thinker? A bird's eye view of life, what Arnold called the din of strife, a little like Floyd's us and them, soothed the doom of numb Zoom rooms. But what sweet prison's not still a prison? What kind heart isn't bathed in blood? What mind doesn't mind being the mind's second act? I was too abstract for the Berkshire snowfall, perhaps, which day after day flared out like influence from a concrete dream about abstract life. The idea being that great nature acts on all living things in a way we trust or must learn to have faith in, that it is a gift for the soul of the lingering child mood in all of us, and makes all mystery answerable, all weight bearable weight, 40 tons of green size in a blue world that wait for an apt word in an apt mood. Blessed, blue-green and serene, the mind put on a pedestal, centered in a gold frame and hung on a sun-warmed wall. But my blood circuits the outlines of skylines asleep, unwept and unsung that way. My soul has grown from a Bronx tenement's power. My Old Testament, a corner store's joy at being part of the life of things. This, as the kids say, facts, often, not oft, kept me from turning soft, and all the shapes of nature turned in on themselves. No stir of air was there but for city world, where nature, in seeing me, cut its heart out while singing, "My country 'tis of thee," and vamped those vaulted buildings into woods. My country 'tis of thee. But now when I think of that lost thought, somehow found here in the sudden and faint power of sacred songs, perplexity sidles in with the setting sun again. I see the blue sky whiten, then brown, since John and Paul sharing a spliff and some blurred thoughts about diminished seventh chords or food in a small smoke-soaked hotel room, and hope one day to finally figure out, first and foremost, if this is nature. Row of mountains, whistling quail, the burned sides of a flowering rowan tree. Green screams like on the old maps of the world where man painted water, olive, or jade. No one would mistake any of these, now or then, for something unnatural. There were days when I was a child, when I would walk by storefronts tattooed with graffiti, the paint still fresh from the can, the tart cataract of aerosols clouding the mind, a rock through the veined window, a pale mash of wood from a smashed guitar splintered like hay, me so horny oozing from some boombox love stowed away from sight, and a lucky charm left on the doorknob and of interest to no one but Tanya, who just walked past, stopped, turned back, took it, and said, "Got one more for my collection, yeah, boy!" What was this, if not one of nature's many strange gifts? Or is nature only what you believe when you read? The hill and dale flex I learned. The fern hill flex I learned alone, and hour after hour, finding it oftentimes pure musical reflex, humanity responding in song to the strange power of an environment enhanced and felt finally, instead of simply seen. Joy inching along the cracks of the sublime, like the music of a glass interfused with the life of all people, all stars, suns, and the sounds of it all, shattering air before the glass itself shatters. Oh man, I grew tired of whatever impels nature to always be elsewhere, and thought, listen, yeah, I have trees and rivers still. Yeah, I have gardens and ponds. I have woods. I have a romantic park that was, behold, once Seneca Village, raised from the world. I've had these things and what they half create, which is just half of what I recognize and welcome as nature in its own sense. For all park is policy. All verse is nurse. Every habitat a cradle for the soul, at least for the time being. Or perchance, there are words, like perchance, that function more or less like what I meant to say, decay being part of the process, faint cloud banks frothing, then finished by the wind, part friend, part foe of what the mind sets out to catch whenever and wherever it can. Read or listened to under sun or street lights. I too crave a bright ocean meadow while the sun braids the green with its warm gold. Once this seemed the only way to be and make a natural world. But I can't betray where I'm from. I don't want that privilege. That doesn't mean neighborhoods sprayed in lead are like emerald meadows that inform and reassure naturally, impress love onto the heart naturally, feed naturally on nature's summer-tinged tongues of chartreuse verbs gifted to the human. But what exists between them is both all there is and nothing at all. Like life grown out of the fiction of poems. Disturb what cannot be disturbed, and then behold as it awakens and sings to the moon in the late morning haze. This is the walk, the long walk from which I have emerged free at last, after a journey of light years across a field of dead ideas matured to life for their own sake, free in my mind finally to remember all the forms of my life enhanced by this dwelling place. Its hard-edged abracadabra, heathen Sunday mornings and phosphorescent grief. No one is ever alone with their thoughts. Alone on a cliff, or here beside me, we are all crowded by presence and perchance. We're listening to scream and screet, we hear the other, even as one of them gleams, and the other gleams. We can't forget one or the other. Ethereal scream and electric screet are parts of the same long link in the same human chain. I came to this poem, the long one, with a lot to say. I'd sung my art before with real zeal, chanting through 3 moods so as not to forget. The ground, then heaven, then the weapon. Years passed. And now, from my high window, the cliffs and canyons of these avenues call me back to sing through fire for their sweet sake. So, that's a long poem. I want to read 2 more poems that are adjoined, and then, hablaremos. Sí. So, you might have been able to pick up that poem was a bit of a pandemic poem. A lot of these poems were written during the lockdown. Everything in this book was written between March 2020 and maybe sometime the middle of last year. We were living in Williamstown for a year and a half during the lockdown. We weren't here in New York. And that time in general is a time where we were all a lot in our heads, isolated, separate, hyper-communicative because of screens and the social menace of social media, but at the same time non-communicative. So the poem has a bit of a remove in it for that reason. I'm very wary of fakery and artifice, and I wanted to write a book that was like how we were living, how I was living, which is a little difficult, very interior. Well, I'm talking around, so these are 2 elegies. They're for the same person. My grandmother, who passed away on March 13th of 2020, which is the same day that we moved up to Williamstown. And yeah, they're called Prelude and Postlude. So Tariq, when you were talking about your processes, I was very much in that process. Is Dylan here?
Yes, he's over there.
You might want to leave the room if this one did. Prelude. My grandmother saw it coming and left. I'd already left. It came late and swift, like a tidal wave mistaken for a wave. Came not as a note, but as an octave. Black-keyed and mangled. Searching the hospice only to find she'd left without notice. The soul clapped from her body, masked by death. Death hiding death from death. And finding no sign of her in the high cheekbones or skin. Strode out on a cough into the evening. In the weeks between her death and being laid to rest, life became COVID-19. Both the living and the dead shared one air. Then the service came and I was not there. I watched from the safe distance of an app as my mother and uncle massed among the massed few in a pewless space, made peace with the orphans who'd come to take their place. Looking at them on screen was like looking out at the world through the bars of a cage. And now, high on a slope near Van Cortlandt, the immortelles of perfect pitch sing Ina Harris to sleep. Her shade goes there to listen, bathed in the scent of ilex, palm, linden, kapok. It is Easter and she is dressed in her lilac vest and hat. Her daughter crossed bridge and Bronx and plague to bring to her. She is 2 steps ahead of this pentameter as it flexes, as it follows her through the flexed valley of the shadow of death. This elegy, which, like all of them, is so useless and late. My grandmother saw it coming. She left. So, it's an elegy. They're all useless. They're late. They're for the living. It's in 3 parts. It's in something like iambic pentameter, but I'm not really writing an iambic pentameter. Basically, writing in 10-syllable lines. It's got rhyme couplets. It's a well-behaved poem. And that's what elegies are kind of for. We kind of do the job. But then I wrote this. Postlude. Her hospital bed. Her favorite red gown. The one embroidered with small purple and gold flowers, trellising the unknown infection riddling every inch of her. Her hair brushed back, but not braided today. The lunch tray remaindered to a corner. Plastic pudding cup. Nectarine. Jaded pillbox. All hollowed out. Verbless. She sang, didn't sing, and sang as she cross-faded to an invisible dimension seen only on the back of her winced lids. The flowers sitting on the windowsill. Those photos pinned to the wall. The turquoise vase. The unused frames. They seemed important. Where would they all go? I surprised myself that for just a second, I deemed those things to be of value in themselves. All that flared bric-a-brac, and felt ashamed. I held her hand in search of some resolve. But as her hand trembled, my hand trembled. I was bad at this. I wanted to prove that I wasn't. My mind reassembled for a moment and shut down. I joined her where Chiron sat at a makeshift table, killing time with his dog in the foyer, playing dominoes by himself, waiting under the faint spectral light of a koi star. She was there only in the most craven sense of the word there. As when someone says, I'll be there soon, when they're still in New Haven. She squeezed my hand and whistled from the strain. I rubbed her hand with my free hand, then kissed it, and then kissed her warm forehead again as I pried my hand from her grip and missed my last chance not to have done that. I looked at the time and saw I had a minute left. Then, after having done all the math, took a deep breath I can never take back. Far away was a better me who would chant, "She saw it coming, so she left." But my car was waiting downstairs, silver and fine free. So I left. The rental purred when I turned it on. And just like that, she was gone. Come join me, Henri, with your seltzer.
Those poems are just magnificent that you read. The Child of Nature and the Postlude, they represent to me two of the veins in your work. One is a kind of, I don't know, like a big essay-ish like mode that brings in all sorts of things and is difficult, you know. I mean, the texture of that poem is so, you know, it has these grand sort of expositional moments, and then it has very autobiographical passages, and they blend together with great beauty in that poem.
Thank you.
But then the postlude, you know, is just a much raw autobiographical, you know, you're sort of holding an electric wire. And they're both really good places for you to mine, I think. I praise you for that. It's a pleasure to hear those poems. When we were talking about getting together today, I asked him which poems he wanted to read, and he chose those two poems, but he chose those three poems, but those two of them were my favorites in the book, so I recommend them to you all. Maybe we should talk just a little bit, just generally about the book.
Sure.
And I'll ask you, like, well, could we talk a little bit about the cover? I mean, the cover and the title, Silver.
Yeah, sure.
The word silver occurs about 10 times in the book. Let's see, I made a little list. We have a silver-lyred Apollo. We have silver mornings, silver haze, silver as shark, silver and fine free, a silver fox, a silver river, a silver-ringed sirens, the plain silver, its vapor trail silver, silver filling the faces, the spaces where they had been. So silver is sort of like a compact metal, like your poems in a way, it seems to me.
Yeah, that's intentional. It's kind of like a diastolic, systolic method. It's kind of like a pulse or a mood. You know, none of my books have a kind of title poem. I don't have a poem called The Ground or Heaven or Living Weapon. Titles for me are more kind of key signatures.
Mm-hmm.
This collection is in the key signature of silver. It's dense, it's reflective. It is malleable. It is multifoliate in use.
Did you discover that after you'd written all the poems?
I was in a mood. I'm not very kind of like, I'm going to, there are lots of books, especially today, they're like project books, right? This book of poem, this book of poems is about right? They kind of like have this kind of like novelistic type of, aspiration to them. But I grew up going to like art galleries and going into the Met, and I like that you're walking into an exhibit. It's just kind of like it's a mood, like an album, right? Like I don't know, the White Album is different from Revolver, and that's always kind of where I'm at with that. So
that's because you're a lyric poet. You're a lyric poet, though sometimes you have narrative and plot, like in the Child of Nature poem. Maybe you should say something about the title of that poem. That was interesting.
Oh yeah, so I don't know if you all know, but I have I made a playlist for this book. So if you just kind of put my name in Silver, either in Spotify or Apple Music, you'll find basically like a bunch of songs. A lot of them are either mentioned in the book or served as sort of inspiration. The Escher tape mixes of the White Album of the Beatles have a recording of a song called Child of Nature that they never put out on an album. But it's actually, Lennon took it and it turned into Jealous Guy. But before it was about going to India, on the road to Rishikesh, I was feeling more or less. So the title clearly has this, you don't need to know that to get a sense of, my sense of kind of nature and where I'm from and why I think that's important. But for me, when you see John and Paul sharing a spliff in a hotel room, thinking about diminished seventh chords and all of that, it's because I'm also very much thinking about that song. And that song actually fits my temperament because it's not a song on the White Album. It's kind of a deep cut. And I'm very much a deep cut kind of a cat, I'm sorry to say.
But I want to say that that's something I admire in your work, that there's both this blending of the high and the low, that, this poem that is using Tinternab Wordsworth as a kind of, mirror of some sort, might also, have John and Paul with a spliff.
Henri, you're such a man of bell arts. If the Beatles are low for you, I get lower in that poem because there's two live crew in that poem, yo. There's me so horny in that poem, and I had to fight the Poetry Foundation to keep that in. They wanted me to take that out, and I said, over my dead ass body. I'll send you that song tonight. But I have loved you a long time.
Well, there's Floyd.
There's Floyd, us and them, yeah.
Also, but then there's also Lycidas and other kind of
Dylan Thomas,
yes. I mean, that's we
now,
live.
as I was young and easy under the apple boughs about the lilting house.
We live in a moment that really praises accessibility. But your poems can be difficult, and I want to praise that. And I want to praise.
I'll take it. You're not wrong.
I mean, they are difficult. I mean, they demand.
Well, I think they're an experience, and we're a guard experience. When you meet somebody, you say, "How you doing?" Everybody always goes, "Oh, I'm good. Oh, I'm fine." Oh, yeah. It's not true, right? We're wired to be that way. But a lot of times, the idea is that poems should be different. I just try to make poems that are like, beings. Poems that are like, hey, let me kind of like tell you about everything in my wound and all this, blah, 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 which I kind of like, it takes all types. I like all types of poetry, but I really try not to, I don't know.
Well, I think that I'd like to praise that too. That the poems that you try, the poems try many different genres. And they kind of cross boundaries of all, of all different, of expectations. I mean, even your name, in a way, combines many, many different things and many different inflections.
And genders, Rowan's actually, I think, more popular name for girls at this point.
Is it?
I think so. Though my dad's name is Rowan, and today's my dad's birthday.
Well, you have I thought it was a tree. I didn't know it was. I thought in your poem it's a tree.
Yeah. It's a tree, yeah.
It is true.
Orange blossoms. Orange.
So I wasn't thinking you as a woman. I was thinking of you as a tree.
Oh.
But,
I contain multitudes.
But Ricardo suggests something different, and Philip suggests something different, and all of those sort of inflections are present in your poems, and I want to praise that as well.
Thank you. Those are also both deep cuts. My mother wanted to name me Cardo because they had a family friend in Antigua who was named Cardo. Fortunately, my mother, being rather formal, put the full name because Cardo in Spanish, just as a good thing, I wasn't named Cardo. And the S is an invention. My father's last name is Philip, but my mother didn't want people to confuse my last name with my first name. Dan Rowan and Martin's laughing, Carl Rowan. So my last name's completely made up.
But a lot of the book is also set in Spain, and there's...
I would say it's set in Catalonia, but...
That's a good response. But there's this... so is that Catalan or Spanish in the poems? Is it?
It depends on I'm not sure if I have any Catalan in the poems. I think there's only Spanish in the poem.
I see.
There's a poem called El Tiempo Indeciso, which is Uncertain Time. That's a short story by Javier Marias. And then La Pulga, which is also Spanish. But, Spanish is spoken in Catalonia. Along, of course, with the beautiful Catalan.
Thank you for reading my poem, which is, 25 years old, 20 years old. It was about the time I met you. And I wonder what it's like. Now you're about to turn 50. Can I say that?
You can say I'm 49, or you can say I'm about to turn 50. Both would be accurate on me.
But I wonder, I'm about to turn 68. I can't believe it. I was much younger than you.
Boy, you're going to have fun a year after that. That's a real magic number.
But I wonder what it's like publishing a book now for you compared to when you published your first book. I mean, there are things that continue through all the books. There are, but I wonder what, now you're established. I mean, in a big way.
I don't know. I mean,
Is it different?
the first two books, they came out in the summer, and I'm always in Barcelona over the summer. I feel like it's a journey, and I'm grateful for anybody who wants to read poetry, but I still think of myself very much as a kid. You have your teachers and you have your betters, and you always want to get better. The good thing about art is that life's a classroom. I don't even call myself a poet. I think that's a very, very honorific, sacred title. I think I make poems, I make stuff, I write, but I'd be hard-pressed for anyone to have a moment where they heard me say I'm a poet. It's high stuff. I'm just responding to, I don't know, the music of what happens,
Well, it's a pleasure to be writing at the same time as you.
Well, it's a pleasure to be writing at the same time as you, Emilio Fabro.
So I think they want us to wind down, and there'll be book signing downstairs in the cafe, and
Drinking, no more tears.
is there anything?
I haven't cried in like decades, man.
It's good that you cried. I think it's...
In front of so many people. I have a reputation on me.
Is there anything more you'd like to say? Something that I haven't asked you?
You have a galley, but you leave here, I want you to have the finished copy. I want to thank you so much for being such a
I
wonderful.
wasn't fishing. No.
I don't respond to fishing, but you're really just an incredible writer of poems. People here who know me know that I for better or worse, don't say what I don't mean. You're an inspiration, as are all of you for being here.
Yeah.
This is the best book that I've written yet. I can say that with great confidence and no doubt. And I just hope that you find some of yourself in it. It's not mine anymore, it's yours. Like Dickinson says, first chill, then stupor, then the letting go. Well, I've let it go, and do with it what you will. But I'm really grateful for spending some time with you on the spinning rock, and with poetry no less. So thank you. Muchas gracias. Drinks on McNally Jackson.
We'll do it later. Yes, thank you so much for coming. Again, you can check in at the desk up here if you're registered online. Books for sale downstairs. You can pepper them with questions if you want to hang out for a little bit and get your book signed, also in the bar. And thanks again. Yeah.
Thank you.